I'm going to call the meeting to order at 7:30. Roll call, William Johnston.
Here.
Thomas Graffinino.
Here.
Lynn Colligan.
Here.
Lisa Kreckler.
Here.
And Phil DiOrio is here. We also have present Stephen Kiley, Town Attorney. First order of business is to review and approve the September 20th, 2023 minutes. Have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then we have a resolution tonight. 12 Park Hill Road, that's our first bit of hearing agenda here. Christina, will you run through that for us? Give us a somewhat abbreviated version.
Application by David Schenker for variance at 12 Tarkettle Road, Shelter Island, New York. The Zoning Board of Appeals has reviewed the subject application and visited subject property and determined that pursuant to Part 617 of the New York Codes, rules and regulations, that this is a type 2 action, so no further secret required review is required. The applicant has requested one area variance in connection with a proposed one-story addition due to the pre-existing non-conforming nature of the subject property. The subject dwelling is already holding a 22.3 feet front yard setback where 30 is required. And the proposed addition will similarly hold a 22.3 feet front yard setback, thereby necessitating a 7.7 feet area variance. Further, since the proposed addition would increase the bulk intrusion into the front yard and a special permit is required from the Zoning Board of Appeals for the same. The Zoning Board of Appeals held public hearings on this application on August 23, 2023, at which time written and oral evidence were presented. Further, the Zoning Board of Appeals has applied the special permit standards enumerated in Town Code Section 133-35 to the facts of the application and determined that the application meets set standards for approval. A resolution of the board is to approve the request for one area variance for the front yard setback relief, as reflected in a Peconic Surveyor's species survey dated May 10, 2023.
Okay, so just so everybody's aware, we're going to vote. It's to approve the area variance and the special permit. Right. May I have a motion to approve these two?
I'll make a motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we need to do a roll call vote. William Johnston,
Yes.
Thomas Graffinino,
Yes.
Lynn Colligan,
Yes.
Lisa Kreckler,
Yes.
and Phil DiOrio votes yes. Next order of business, we reopened the hearing for Flower. We were looking for a landscaping plan. This reopening of the hearing is the submittal of the plan and discussion of the landscaping plan, and we're going to really limit it to that. We're not going to discuss other aspects of this application at this time. Is someone going to present the,
You want a public notice?
oh, sorry, Christina.
Rehearing on the application of Anthony and Anna Marie Flower of 10 Cheekwood Avenue, Shelter Island, New York, which is Zone AA, nearshore Old Valley District. It's more specifically described on the Suffolk County Tax Map as 700-5-2.5. The applicant is seeking area variance from Shelter Island Town Code, Section 133-7B5A and B as follows. Hold a 12.3 front yard setback where 50 is required due to raising an existing dwelling. Hold a 6.1 feet side yard setback where 40 feet is required to raise an existing dwelling. Hold a 16.3 feet rear yard setback where 40 is required to raise an existing dwelling. Hold 2.8 feet side yard setback where 30 is required for a new side stair. Hold a 16.7 feet front yard setback where 50 is required for a new side stair. Hold a 24.1 front yard setback where 50 is required for a new front stair. Hold 26.6 side yard setback where 30 is required for a new rear deck. Hold a 16.5 feet rear yard setback where 30 is required for a new rear deck. To hold a 14 feet rear yard setback where 30 is required for a new rear deck stair. A special permit is also required pursuant to Section 133-23A to alter or expand the pre-existing non-conforming dwelling. This hearing will be open for the limited purpose of receiving an updated vegetation plan.
Is there someone who wants to present on behalf of the applicants?
Yes, good evening, Matt Sherman with Sherman Engineering. I'm sorry I'm by Zoom, but I wasn't able to get there tonight. I'm here representing the Flowers. If I could share my screen, I can put the landscape plan that we've provided to the board up on the screen, and you can we can go over it very quickly. It's shouldn't take much. It's a fairly simplistic plan. Okay.
Technology wonderful.
Yeah,
So fast.
Okay. You got it now?
yes,
Okay, great. So yeah, really, it's a very basic plan. We worked with North Fork Landscape Design to come up with this. Everything is native to the area. Either comes directly off of the latest CAC recommended planting plans, or at least does not have is not anything that's invasive to the area. The same plan is also when we go to the wetlands, the planning board for the wetlands review for this application. Assuming we get an approval from the ZBA, this is the same plan that's going to be presented to them. Basically, on the road side of the property, where the new driveway is going, we're going to have forsythia. We're going to have along the front of the house, there's a mix of hydrangea, bayberry, dogwood trees. Same thing along the side. That's the east side that's facing the yacht club. There's some summer sweet, dogwood, sea lavender. There's some good flowering plants, some pollinators. And then on the water side of the property, red cedar, dogwood, hydrangea, bayberry, and some more of that sea lavender. So the idea of this plan is because this building is being raised so that it complies with flood zone requirements, and in the event that there is a flood through this property, that we don't have issues with the structure itself. We didn't want a whole lot of dense plantings along the face of this building, because that in essence would kind of counteract the breakaway walls and the flood zone construction. So the plantings that were chosen are a little bit less dense, will allow water to flow through in the unfortunate event that we do have flooding in this area, meets the town's CAC requirements with respect to native plantings, and then also softens the look of this raised building so that it's not offensive in any way, to have that lattice work or the breakaway walls that are that first 8 feet or so of the view from the road and from the neighboring properties and from the water. That whole viewscape of that view of that portion of the building is broken up by these plantings. So that was the driving goal here for this plan, and I think that the guys over at North Fork Landscape did a good job meeting that requirement.
Do we have any questions for Matt?
No.
Anybody else would like to weigh in on this plan? Come on up, Lori. It's just state your name.
Hi, good evening, Lori Beard Raymond. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Shelter Island Heights Property Owners Corporation. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to first thank you for the opportunity to speak about this additional document that has been submitted after the first hearing was closed. Many of the public hearings within the town are being closed with missing documents or revised documents. They're submitted after hearings are closed, which doesn't allow the public to comment. Saying that, the Heights Property and Roads and Architectural Committee have no objection to this application. The new landscaping plan that is submitted is simple, with no new pavers, patios, or impervious structures added. The owner and the architect have gone out of their way to work with the Heights Property and Road and Architectural Committees, and we very much appreciate that. Therefore, we would just like to reiterate that we support this application to preserve the existing structure, and it's already in the town wetlands. The only other comment that I have is not to reiterate anything we've discussed before, but in the resolution, we'd like to request that all construction materials and debris be secured from the wind at all times, i.e. covered dumpster, for example. It gets very windy down there. Debris blows around a lot. And the hearing that we discussed before with the construction guidelines set forth by the Heights, which was developed to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in here? Matt, do you have anything else you wanted to add to this?
No, not at all. Unless you have direct questions for me, I think we're good.
Okay, and anybody out in Zoom land want to make a comment? Take that as no. All right, so we're going to close this hearing, and we'll leave it open to written correspondence until October 11th. All right, next up, we have 2 Westmoreland Drive, Skydell Lewandowski. Who'd like to present?
What can do?
Oh, we're going to do it, sorry. We're just going to get reading of the public notice. I'm sorry, I like to jump ahead too much.
A hearing on the application of Jack Skydell and Alexa Lewandowski, the owners of 2 Westmoreland Drive, Shelter Island, New York, which is Zone A near Shore Overlay District and is more specifically described on the Suffolk County Tax Map as 700-18-1-26.1. The applicants are seeking an area variance from Shelter Island Town Code, Section 133-6B7, to convert an existing non-habitable attic to a habitable third story. Only 2 stories are permitted.
Ready, sir?
Yes, sir, please state your name for the record.
Okay, good evening, Chair, members of the board. My name is Joseph Prokop. I'm an attorney, and I represent the owners of the property, Jack Skydell and Alexa Lewandowski, the property 2 Westmoreland Road. In this, Westmoreland Drive. In this application, Mr. Skydell is present, and Ms. Lewandowski is on by Zoom, as I understand it. I also have tonight with me several people, a few experts that I will be asking questions of, and also are available for questions by the members of the board if you have any. They're people that have been involved in the development of the plans that were submitted to the building department that were the background of this application. I'd like to just give some background about this application and the property, which I think is important. Jack Skydell and Alexa Lewandowski have owned the property for more than 30 years at this time. And prior to owning this property and maintained it as a residence, prior to owning this property, they had another house on Shelter Island that they sold to purchase and move into this house. The house was purchased by them on March 29th of 1991. And significant in the history of the property, which I'll mention a few times in my presentation, a certificate of occupancy was issued on the house. It's certificate of occupancy 1774A in August of 1990, prior to their purchase of the house, and a letter referencing that C of O and stating that the house was in compliance with it was issued to them in anticipation of their closing on March 28th of 1991, just a day prior to their closing. The 1774A, that certificate of occupancy, provided for a first floor of the house with a living room, kitchen, dining room, and a bathroom. A second floor with 3 rooms that were used as bedrooms. And also provided for a third floor that was divided space, and as a condition of the certificate of occupancy being issued, stated that this third floor would be used for storage. The approaching the closing, the initial interest in the property by Mr. Skidell and Alexa was pursuant to an advertisement actually that had been issued by a trustee of the federal court, a representative of the government. I have a copy of that, copies of that notice that I would like to provide to the board and make part of the record tonight. If I could, please. If I could pass these up. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep one copy. Pass them on to you. Thank you, sir. So as you can see, sir, and members of the board, the property was marketed by, as I said, a representative of the federal court, and it states in this advertisement, what was advertised as the condition of the property at that time, which included a developed third floor space. It's my understanding that they went to contract in February of 1991. And due to a question about the use of the third floor, an inspection was done of the property by the town building inspector at the time. And a letter was dated March 28th of 1991, it happened to be the day before the closing, was issued by the building department and stated that the property, including the third floor, was in compliance with that August 1990 certificate of occupancy. And that the third floor at that time was used for storage. I mentioned to the board, so they proceeded to closing, and as I said, a copy of the deed is included in the October 2022 letter that was submitted to the board, and with the application for your review if that's important to you. Then proceeding to the closing, they, through the more than 30 years that the Mr. Skidell, Ms. Lewis.
May I ask one quick question? So you refer to a March 28th, 1991 letter. That's correct. But in here, it says that everything had been removed from the attic and it was only going to be used for storage. That was the day before the closing.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Everything meaning furniture, whatever was up there at the time, it was still divided space.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and in this, and I'll mention as a follow-up to that question, it's exactly the same condition today in 2023 as it was on that day when it was in March 28th of 1991 when it was inspected and that letter was issued. And
and I don't see anything about a bathroom here in this letter. On the third floor.
The bathroom was present at that time, and there's been no alterations to the third floor since that C of O was issued in August of 1990.
And that C of O was for a storage area on the third floor, is that correct?
It was, no, the C of O was for the entire house.
Right.
But it mentioned that the third floor was to be used as storage, yes. Which is one of the reasons why we're here today, sir. To receive approval of the third floor, which I'll go into in a minute.
Okay.
Thank you. And we had, to verify that, I have two or three of the experts that are here tonight have recently been actually in the third floor several times as these plans have been developed, and will provide testimony to the board as to the condition of the third floor, which is actually being used as storage now, light storage, and not for any other purpose. The owners relied, as I said, the owners relied on that letter and proceeded to closing. And what has happened in the meantime is that in the 30 years that the owners own the house, There were a number of projects that were done at the property, a pool, very minor alterations to the structure in the property. They've been fully compliant with all the regulations of the town. Each time they've applied for, in advance, for whatever approval was required, received it, and, did the work in compliance with the town requirements and obtained a C of O. All of those C of Os are attached to both letters that I submitted to the board, the October 2022 letter and the June of 2023 letter. When I became involved in this application, I reviewed the building department file, and I learned in that review that what had actually happened was each of those approvals going back for 30 years had been stricken. So somebody had actually taken a marker and stricken out the signature on each of those approvals. And this is not copies that I received in response to a FOIL request, that didn't want to be represented as official copies. They were actually the copies in the building department file that had been stricken and believed to be, for that reason, rescinded. This was done without any notice to the applicant, to the owners, and for that reason, which I submit to you as a violation of New York state law, they were entitled to the due process notice before a C of O could be stricken like that, or approval could be stricken, and then entitled to make an appearance either before this board or some kind of response to the building department before something like that was done. And for that reason, the initial filing of this application dealt with requesting an interpretation from the ZBA that the striking of those approvals was improper, or as an alternative, requesting an appeal of the striking of those approvals, and setting a hearing so the owners could be heard and giving them the due process that they were entitled to prior to that.
Sir,
Yes.
Would you review the process whereby, or whoever obtained those documents, the original, so-called original documents from the building department?
There was at the same time, there was a FOIL request made.
At what point was that?
That was in August of 2022.
Okay, so a FOIL request was made.
And also, I personally reviewed the file,
Okay.
as I said.
Okay, yeah, I'm just asking for clarification. Thank you. So you obtained the files yourself?
I obtained copies of those approvals. I don't recall, it may have been a full copy that I received in response to the FOIL request that was made by the owner, one of the owners. I believe that was the case, but I also reviewed and personally saw the stricken records in the file.
All right, we do have the building inspector here, so I think he should be able to respond to that, to maybe clarify.
Okay, sure.
I'm sort of surprised that Mr. Prokop is saying this, because I had meetings with him in which I explained that these were never stricken. If you want an official copy with the signature, you have to pay for it. He chose not to pay for it. He got unofficial copies of the C of Os. He went through the file and found other records. None of those C of Os he's talking about were stricken. They were not rescinded. They were just unofficial copies. All of those C of Os exist, and there's C of Os and C of Cs for various stages of work. But the bottom line is, it was never approved, the third floor was never approved as having.
Okay, can I have one quick question though about so you still have the originals of these C of Os that are not.
Yes, and Mr. Prokop has seen them in.
Okay, so maybe you could just submit copies of those to us, read before our work session or at some point. Yeah.
Sure.
And they remain in full force and effect.
Yeah, there are a series of C of Os and C of Cs for work that was done at various points to the property. When you request a when you request copies, if you want an official copy, it costs a significant, it used to be $50, at $75 maybe. But if you just want an unofficial copy for records, you get one with the signature embossed.
Okay,
And they're stamped, if you look at them, they're all stamped, not official copy.
okay, thank you.
So thank you for asking that question. It makes my job a lot easier, and I appreciate that. And I'm sorry if I didn't mean to be disrespectful to Mr. Karen or the department in any way, but it was, viewing those records is what we had thought had happened. I'm glad to hear that those records are still in effect. So that portion of the application then is to the extent that those documents are in place, as Mr. Karen said, then we're not looking for that relief as to that particular aspect of the application. And we can focus on the rest of it, please. The application then, as we heard, has to do with the use of the third floor. The third floor was divided at the time that they divided it into the condition that it's in now when the owners bought bought the house, and no alterations have been made. We proceeded after that October letter was filed with the town and the application was filed with the ZBA. We were contacted and told that we were required to actually put forth plans that would for a conversion of the third floor to habitable space and have that application denied, and then the application that we had filed could move forward. So what the owners did at that time was we obtained we developed an application through working with Sentry fire suppression systems. And Mr. Rusi from that company is here tonight, if there's any questions from Mr. Karen or the board. And we developed plans for a sprinkler system that would be fully compliant with New York State code, which is the requirement as far as New York State code is concerned to use the third floor for habitable space. The law in that code was amended a year or two ago, and to require now that not just the third floor needs to be sprinklered, but there has to be a fire suppression system from the third floor down to the point of egress, which in this case is the front door of the house. So the plans that were submitted with to the building department and are made part of our June 1st letter with the letter of denial actually are plans to, as I said, to sprinkle the third floor, but also for a full sprinkler system all the way down the hallway and the landings of the second floor to the main hallway of the first floor and then to the front door. And it would be fully compliant with the requirements of New York State code. I just would like to mention that the benefit of that system in terms of the safety of the house is that because of that requirement, and that actually now the main hallway of the house will be sprinklered. As far as the occupants of the house or the fire personnel, in the event that should ever happen, and the sprinkler system is used, is now not just the third floor is sprinklered, but actually the main access and egress for the second floor and the first floor, right out to the front door of the house is sprinklered. And the personnel coming in or the occupants leaving would be protected, as would the structure itself. I met 2 weeks ago with, I contacted the fire commissioners and also the fire department. I met 2 weeks ago with Commissioner Ryder at the house and also Chief Rasmussen. And we walked around the entirety of the outside of the house, the perimeter of the house and property. And I also provided them the plans for the system that's going to be installed. They said that their position was that they are in favor of the system being installed, and that they wish that other, it had been, will be or would be considered at other structures or homes in the town. And particularly, they were supportive when I showed them the water supply at the house to supply the system, and the quality of the plans that were developed by Century, and also they gave a couple recommendations about things that might be considered with the system, which we will work with them on, having to do with the possibility of adding from a pumper truck from the fire department, adding more water into the system if necessary, and a few other things that aren't required by code but would be considered. I'd like to submit to the board that I understand the application. I understand the application and what's involved with it in your review of the relief that we request. But I very respectfully suggest to the board that because of the history of the property and the setting of the property, as you'll hear from the three people we have here to talk about it or answer questions, that it won't be a precedent in the town that would affect consideration or applications of other properties if they are made. That the property has a long history that is detailed in my letters that I described tonight. It's not close to any other houses. It's apart from any other houses. One thing about this application that I said is unique, the use of the third floor for habitable space will not involve any exterior work at all. There'll be nothing changed on the outside, except there will be a small, as I understand, a small generator that will be installed under a porch, properly ventilated, but it's a feature that is important for the system. Not adjacent to another property or residence. There won't be any exterior work. There won't be any views that are blocked. There won't be any increase in traffic or the number of people coming to the house. And for that reason, given the merit, I believe that there's a merit to the application, which as I said, we'll go into, but again, I'd like to emphasize that we believe that it won't be a precedent.
I have a question, since
Yes.
we're talking about exterior work. How old is the roof on that house?
It's brand new.
When was it installed? What does brand new mean?
About 6 months ago.
And this is Christian Fokine speaking. He'll be introduced to the board.
Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up question?
That's it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know that, 6 months. So if I have one other pass up, if I could, for the board, which is one of the things, like when I was there with Commissioner Ryder and Chief Rasmussen, one of the things that we did was to check the access to the third floor and the other areas of the house, the exterior access and the availability for a flat property perimeter for trucks to access, and then ladder work if it's necessary to get to the floors of the house. And they were satisfied with what they saw as far, they believe that their equipment could access the house if necessary. And so you can get a picture of what we're talking about with this house. I'd like to submit pictures of the exterior of the house if I could, please.
Thank you.
Joe, do they have a letter that they'd like to submit in support, or is it just the verbal?
Support is verbal, but if I could ask that the record be kept open for 10 days so I could submit a letter, I'd appreciate it. If I could request it, please. If the board would like to.
We'll see if we're going to close tonight or keep it open.
Thank you, sir. So these are different views of the house. There's no, the next house is a fairly good distance from the property. I would mention that I did send the required notices to the properties and abutting properties as required, and that there was no responses were received by my office.
Christina, we have not received any correspondence on this application.
No.
So to explain again, just briefly, the board received two submissions from my office. One was dated October and the other was dated June. And I explained already the reason why that was. We first submitted the first submission based on information from the review of the building. Well, what we had thought at the time was a review of the building file. And then received the actual denial letter in April of 2023, and then submitted the June letter with the request for the appeal of that denial letter. So before moving ahead, I'd like to mention to you that because of the background that I just talked about, we are asking for an interpretation that the third floor could be used as habitable space if that system the fire suppression system is installed, because of that's the missing component as far as the state code is concerned. We are asking for an appeal. We have submitted an appeal of the April 2023 denial of that request to use the building permit application and request to use the third floor for habitation. One of the things about the state code that has changed a few years ago is that it used to be that a municipality could have a provision in its code that was more restrictive than the state code. And but now that changed, actually several years ago, but in recent time that changed. And the law now, we respectfully submit that the law now is that a municipality cannot have a provision in its code that's either more or less restrictive than the state code. So it used to be that you cannot have a provision.
But sir, we're talking about the building code or the zoning code?
The building codes, yes. So we submit to the town that the zoning code sets the height of the house, which the building's fully compliant in the 35 feet. And the floor exists pursuant to that code. It's just a question of whether it's habitable space or not. The floor was approved, this third floor, in the C of Os that were submitted. And for that reason, we asked for an interpretation that the third floor could be used because of that provision that I mentioned, that a code could not be more restrictive than the state code. That if we meet the requirement for the fire suppression system and any other code requirements that are met, that.
So then let me ask you, sir, if we were to interpret the code the way that you're looking for, then anyone on Shelter Island could build a 3-story house as long as they were going to put in a fire suppression system?
If they met the other requirements.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just want to chime in on this for 1 second. The section of the law he's referring to is New York State Executive Law, Section 379. It says that, regarding construction standards, municipality may be stricter, but you would have to get approval first from the state. So it says, but I don't necessarily think that this is construction standards. It's the definition of a story and so that's something that could be debated. I don't know.
We can do our discussion on that at the work session, I think.
Okay, but I just wanted to put it into the record.
And finally, we're asking for a variance of the town code section that prohibits a third floor, and requesting that this we be permitted to put in the fire suppression system, whatever else is the building department properly requires, and use the third floor for habitable space, and that a C of O is issued for that use.
Okay, and there's nothing in that law that you spoke about that says anything about that the town code could not in fact prohibit a third floor in a house, is that right?
No, but the problem, the conflict is that the conflict is that the town does allow, I mean, that the third floor is there and was approved. So the question is then whether the town code could, the state version is to be compliant and used as habitable space, we would only have to put in the fire suppression system. The town.
Well, that's the building code, not the actual town code that's prohibiting the third floor. Right, the town code is what's doing that, not a building.
Yes, that's correct. Zoning code, yes. But in the house, the point that we'd like to make is that the house is compliant in all other respects with the town zoning code. It meets the height limit. And that the third floor was approved. It's just a question,
Right,
not as habitable space.
right.
Yes.
Okay.
So at this time, I'd like to bring up Christian Fokon, the contractor for the property. I will try to make this brief, but I would like to ask him a couple of questions and have him available for the board.
Christian Fokine, general contractor, Shelter Island, New York.
Do you swear a witness in here, or do?
Yeah.
We're not going to be doing any swearing.
Well,
I swear I won't swear.
I needed to ask, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Fokine, could you please explain, just give a brief description of your profession? And
Sure, I've been on Shelter Island since 1981. I've been involved in this actually on several occasions over the years for the past 30 years. And everything from new houses to renovations to historic restorations, design as well. And I'm very familiar with this building since I moved here.
what is your involvement with the building permit application and the third floor?
Currently, I submitted an application to change the third floor from non-habitable space to habitable space. And basically make it conform to the state code.
And when was, just as a point of clarification, when was the last time that you were actually in the third floor of the house?
About a month ago.
And did you have access to complete access to the third floor?
Yes.
And what was the condition of the third floor at that time?
Boxes and empty rooms.
What was the use of the third floor, if you could tell?
It looked like storage. That's always been that way as far as I've known. I know there was a brief moment when there was actually, the door was locked at one point and nobody could go up there, but that's been removed.
Okay, thank you. And in the project that you have submitted an application for, is there any exterior work or disturbance?
No.
So will all the work be on the interior of the house only?
The only thing would be, we have a cistern outside, 10,000 gallon cistern. So there's a connection already, that's the house. We do have to increase the size of the pump, so there might be some disturbance of the lawn, be able to get the pump in, things like that. But very minor.
And will the height of the house be increased?
Yeah.
And as far as you know, will there be any, with this project, will there be any negative impacts on the neighborhood or the community? What about the adjoining properties? And will there be any views or any aesthetic factors that will be disturbed at all?
No, whatsoever.
And excuse me, have you worked on any other homes in the town that are at third stories?
Yes, there's several in the heights, matter of fact, there's historic buildings in heights that are 3 stories.
And how many are there that you would say that
I
you
don't
worked
know.
on?
Probably
Can I ask one quick question,
Sure.
sir? How many of those were built after the adoption of zoning code?
1870s.
so you would say the vast majority, if not all, were built prior to zoning?
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
And how many of those are habitable? And how many are used for storage?
Well,
Approximately.
I don't know, I'm not involved in that part of it. You know, we're talking about I'm talking about the whole house.
Yep, no, I'm just,
One was supporting a three-story house that was falling down. So that was our job, to support the house, not to finish the third floor, but to support the building from.
so you would say you've not been involved in any projects on Shelter Island that takes the third story and converts it to habitable space. Is that correct? Thank you.
But given the applications that you work on in other third-story houses, would you say that a third story would be unusual in the community?
Yeah, it's unusual, yeah.
Is it, would it be, if the third story was, excuse me, if the third floor of this house was converted to, third floor, excuse me, to a habitable space or living use, would that conform with other conditions in the?
Yeah, so I mean, from the outside the house, it looks no different. So the big issue, I think, that comes up when we talk to people on the street basically is, well, if they have it 3 stories, will it be too tall? Will it block the view from other people, things like that? But this is already there. It meets the height requirements, always did. This doesn't change that, or doesn't set a precedent to change that. You still have to stick to the 35-foot maximum height. And you wouldn't see anything, it would look no different than it does today.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Folkeen's available if the board has any other questions for him.
I have a question. You're putting a generator in, right?
Right.
Propane?
Yes,
You got a tank in the ground already, or you got to add that?
you have to add that.
All right,
It has to be, I think the tanks could be just for the generator,
yeah,
not for any other part of the house, yeah.
okay.
What will the tank be, above ground or under?
In ground,
And it'll meet the state building requirements?
yes.
I don't have any further questions for you, sir. Thank you.
You-
And next, we'd like to call Mr. Rusi. Mr. Rusi is from Century Systems. Mr. Rusi, could you introduce yourself to the board?
My name is Rusi Mitev. I own the company Century Fire Protection. I'm working only in that area, Shelter Island, North Fork, South Fork, trying not to go far away. And that's only I'm doing, fire suppression system.
What parts of the house will the system be installed within the house?
You're gonna be on third floor and egress to the first floor.
Okay, and what is the egress to the first, is it egress to the front door? Is that what?
Yes, to the front door, yeah.
Okay.
Can you just kindly not be repetitive with the information?
I have the plan, which I can show you the plan if you like.
I'm sorry?
I have the plan for the house.
Yeah, no, we understand when you presented this the first time, and we believe what you say is true. So if we could just not be repetitive with the questions you're asking.
I'm sorry.
Just appreciate
I'm
it.
doing that for myself, I apologize.
No, it's
I
okay.
don't mean to
Thank you.
prolong this. Thank you, thank you. Mr. Rusi, have you done other third floor suppression installations?
Yes, I did a few months ago. The last one was in Chiquit Lane. I believe, or the Chiquit Lane, that's we did at third floor. We did one in Shore Road. We did the house next to the golf course. I remember it was 3. It was like 5-6 years ago.
Would we be able to get those addresses?
Yes, I can get the addresses, yes. I have in my office, but right now I wasn't prepared to those. I know where the house is, but I don't remember exactly the addresses.
Okay, it'd be,
But one I know it's sure, because building inspector inspected that project in Chiquit Lane.
Chiquit Lane, Chiquit Ave.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
the old house.
let's not have this back and forth, just please get us those addresses.
Okay, I'll get those addresses, exactly.
And those addresses are all on Shelter Island, right?
Yes.
Okay. And have you installed systems on third floors in other towns or villages?
A lot. In Southampton, after the pandemic, every attic they convert to living space, like a third floor, and I did the third floor and actually attic and the egress to the front door.
Okay. And was the work that you did, was it permitted in those towns
Of
and
course,
villages?
they permitted the NFPA 13.
And I don't have any further questions for you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question. I have a quick question for you, sorry. And so the third floor suppression fire systems that you've put in on Shelter Island, again, very similar question to Mr. Fokine that I asked. What type of spaces were they? Were they habitable or were they storage?
No, they live, the people used to living space, yeah.
And how many
Um,
on Shelter Island that you did?
Probably 5, 6.
If you get us the address for those,
I'll get the address.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have one other person to bring up. It's Keith Kellner, who's an architect. Mr. Kellner, what is your profession, please?
I'm an architect, licensed in New York State for the last 26 years.
And other than as licensed architect, are there any other New York State certifications that you hold?
Code enforcement official, certified, and chairman of the zoning board of appeals in a village in Suffolk County.
And the code enforcement official, as you mentioned, is that basically the same requirements as a building inspector? Is that
similar? Yeah.
And do you have, excuse me, when are you familiar with the requirements that exist for the use of a third floor for habitable space?
Yeah, for New York State residential code, it requires an automatic residential sprinkler system on the third floor with all homes with a third floor.
And are you familiar with the property 2 Westmoreland Drive?
Yes, I've been there.
Okay, and what is your involvement with the project that we've discussed tonight?
I drew the existing conditions for the third floor
and
for the fire suppression system.
And with regard to the third floor, when were the times that you were in the third floor, if you were?
It was twice, in 22 and once in 22 and once in 23.
And what was the condition or use of the third floor at those times, that, if you were able to determine it?
It was vacant, nothing in there but a few boxes for storage.
With regard to the application that's submitted, do you have any feeling do you have any opinion as to whether the variance that's requested is substantial?
Well, it's not substantial in the fact that the third floor is already there. That has been stated. Nothing's going to change that. So I would say it's not substantial. No work has to be done to the outside or building.
And what about with respect to the work that needs to be done for this application? Do you have an opinion as to whether there'll be any impacts on the neighborhood or adjoining properties?
I don't think there'll be any negative impacts to the character of the neighborhood. It's, as was said, nothing is going to change on the outside. The character is a nice shingle style with a Victorian flair, which is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. And I don't think there'll be any negative environmental impacts because nothing's really changing. That hasn't been there for the last 30 some odd years since the third story existed.
The relief that's requested, this variance to use the third floor for living purposes, is that for habitation? Is that could that be achieved by any other method other than the variance that you're aware of?
No.
And I don't have any further questions for Mr. Kellner unless the members of the board do.
What village do you work for?
Village of Islandia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving ahead, in my final comments, I'd like to state to the board that, as you heard, the granting of the variance won't have an impact on the neighborhood or adjoining properties. With the exception of the generator, which will be, as I said, under has been designed to be under a porch. The tank cannot be under the porch, as I understand it, but will be in a location, will be buried and in a location so it's not visible. There won't be any impacts on neighboring properties. The height's not being increased. There's no exterior changes at all, as I've said. So the board, under state law, as of course you're familiar with, section 267 of the town law has considerations that the board has to make in its consideration of this application, and which I'm sure that you're familiar with. The first consideration is whether or not there's the relief, if granted, would cause an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties. And as I said, and I'm sorry to repeat myself, but one of the things about this application is that there's not going to be any exterior change, except for the things that I mentioned. The neighboring properties residences are distant from this home, and there won't be any views or any aesthetics or character of the neighborhood that will be affected. The second consideration that the board should make is whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some other method, which is feasible. To go back to the beginning of the discussion, the importance of this is that this is a condition that's existed for many years. It was in the applicant's initial interest in the property. It was represented to be usable space for that purpose. There was a condition in the C of O that was issued, and also in the letter that was issued to the applicants. But at that point, they were involved in the contract and were not in a position. It was the day before the closing. They were not in a position to back out or take any other course of action. They have respected these restrictions to the extent that they've been able, as best as they could through the more than 30 years that they've been in the property. The testimony tonight is that, as you heard, that it is used only as storage space, respecting that restriction. And we believe that on that consideration, you should rule in favor of the application also. The third consideration is whether the requested area variance is substantial. I understand that it's an addition of living space or habitable space in the house, or expansion of that habitable space. However, the space is already there. It's been there for now nearly 40 years, and more than 30 years that these people have owned the house. And for that reason, we believe that the area variance is not substantial. And the next consideration would be whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. And this consideration would be something that is not a final determination, which is relevant, but not necessarily preclude the granting of the variance. The difficulty that they've had, the proposed variance they want to make the change in the house and receive the approval, but this is a condition that that existed when they moved ahead with the closing. And if the board feels that it is self-created, that would not preclude the granting of the variance for that reason. And with that, I think that I thank you very much for your time tonight. And
I have a couple more questions.
Okay, please.
We haven't really discussed and talked about what the actual space is going to be used for. We keep saying habitable. Can you walk me through what it's going to look like and what it's going to be specifically used for? A living room, bedrooms, what?
Oh, sure. Okay. So it's divided. It came divided when they bought the house. There's not going to be any alterations. It's exactly the way that it's always been. There's two rooms that could be used as bedrooms. And And another room, which is a bathroom.
Okay.
So when I say could be used as bedrooms, I mean, I think that would probably be the intention, but, one might be a study, home office or a private room, something like that. But their intention is to use them as two bedrooms. There's no other access to that space from any other outside, any outside exit or egress from the property. So there's no chance that, another thing that's unique about this application is that they're not doing this to have an apartment or another dwelling unit, anything like that. That space can only be accessed through the hallway to the front door, and that's
How many bedrooms are in the house currently?
3. So it would be going to 5 bedrooms.
Bedrooms to 5. And did you look at any other ways that you could create that desired change of adding 2 bedrooms in a code compliant way without having to come to ZBA? I mean, I'm looking at the lot and it's a big lot, or did you look at other options?
Yes, we did, actually. And one of the things about the house, it's the design of the house is great. I mean, it's a very presentable house, obviously. But actually, the square footage of the house is relatively small. The floor, the perimeter of the house on each of the floors. So without changing the exterior, there's no other way internally to subdivide rooms. The existing rooms are actually very small on the other floors. And we didn't want to go through the things that we talked about tonight, where there would be any other impact on the property or the views or aesthetics, through an alteration of the exterior of the property.
What's the septic? Is it an old septic or a new septic system in there?
It's an older system that's greatly oversized.
It was for 6 bedrooms.
Oh, thank you.
It's a very large system. And if you look at the survey, there's restrictions as to what could be done on the exterior of the house. This was something that I went back and forth with the surveyor and also with your staff, which did a great job reviewing the survey. So we probably would not be able to add, it would be difficult to add anything on the exterior of the house because of where it's located for that reason. So the additional space would be, the additional living space would have to be on the inside, probably.
Is that bathroom operational and functional right now on the 3rd floor?
Excuse me, yes, it is.
Yes.
This is Mr. Skydell.
Yeah, sorry. Chime in, please.
Yeah,
Sorry about that, that.
Please just
State your name.
the record, sorry.
Oh, sure. I'm Jack Skydell, owner of the house, along with my wife, Alexa Lewandowski. That gives me an opportunity to address, I think, a question which came up earlier about was there ever a bathroom up there? If that auction announcement, which you were given earlier, states there was 2 bedrooms up there, it's finished space, and later on it says there's 4 bathrooms. Well, we inspected the house before the auction. One of those bathrooms was upstairs, and it's always been plumbed and it's always operational. So there's nothing in that 3rd floor which we structurally built upon closing. So yes, it is operational. And I may have a couple of other clarifying comments, but maybe I'll come back and.
If you'd like to make, if you feel it would be helpful, sure. Yes.
Okay, since I'm up here, if you will, just to clarify, because we handed out the auction announcement, just to get the kind of timeline right. So the house goes, is announced, public auction notice comes out. We became aware through the notice and through some other real estate, things like that. Had the opportunity as bidders to inspect the house prior to the auction. The house was pretty beat up. It was sitting for at least 2 years, I believe, before it went to auction, given the bankruptcy process. So, we knew we had a lot of renovation, but the 3rd floor was as it was today. Obviously, we've maintained it over the years, but structurally it was that floor. And I think that's important. So we went to the auction, okay, to kind of hurry this along. We bid on it based on that it had a third floor, which was livable space, as advertised, the 4 bathrooms that were there. We won the auction. We come up to closing and we learned that we're not going to get a CO on the house. I inquired, there must have been a CO on the house. How can there not be a CO now? Okay, and the resolution at the time from the town was, okay, you're right, there was a CO. And if you use this space as storage space, then we'll issue the CO. And that was the genesis of those letters that were issued to us and the attorney for the lender that is in your files there. So we got the letters, the lender was happy. We were sort of happy because the alternative would be to, either try to wrangle through this in a protracted legal battle or just forfeit our deposit. And we closed on the house. And we certainly, my wife and I, believed we were in compliance with town code throughout most of the time we've owned the house. Not only because we got those letters, but because of the subsequent approvals that we've gotten from the town to do other improvements on the house. So it isn't, in our minds at least, self-created, nor is it, something that we have ignored over the years. It came up again recently as we started to do other improvements on the house. Building department said, we have a problem here. That space actually is habitable because it's sheetrock and there's bathrooms, sofa, and so on. So, surprise to us, we had a compliant CO. So we are going back to the other question, tying the things together. It wasn't we don't have this grand plan to build out the house to get 2 more bedrooms. We have space. We've used it actually mostly for office space, particularly during the pandemic. If up there, you need a place to share, sit up there. People use the bathroom from time to time and so forth and so on. But we don't have any grand plan to build out the house. But we find ourselves in the situation of either, I guess 3 things can happen. One is you just let it be what it is, but we're told that's not acceptable from the building department's perspective. In other words, we have a CO, we're not using it for anything. We could just leave it like it is. That's the way the house has been. But if you're going to define it as habitable space, the only other alternatives that I understand are available to us is somehow we rip out sheetrock or plumbing. I'm not sure what defines non-habitable space. And that seems like a big hardship for something that's there. So what's the other alternative that we explored was based upon New York code. If we put a fire suppression system in, then we have habitable space. And I don't know what our intent, honestly, I guess I don't know what my intention is. It's not like we need, our kids are gone. It's not like we need extra bedrooms, but I certainly don't want to rip out something simply because it would destroy value of a house, to be honest. Right, and I'm not planning a sale of a house. We're not planning, in fact, we want to stay on the house. That's the whole purpose of this. But I certainly just don't want to destroy something. That seems like a pretty extreme solution to a problem which we can litigate why it occurred. It didn't occur because we actually built something out in the dark of night, so to speak. So we thought at least a more productive solution, and we recognize fully that it creates issues with the town code and everything else, was let's make it compliant with state code. People are safe. It addresses liability concerns that the town may have. There's no other stuff that we talked about. It's not going to affect the exterior. And isn't that a better solution? Certainly for us, but I think, as a matter of public policy, it's a good solution. And because of the circumstances, whether or not that allows everybody to do something on the island, I guess I'm not in a position to say. But we had a valid CO at the time we closed. And the house has existed as it has been for a number of years. So, I don't know if those specific circumstances creates a situation which creates this maybe undesirable result. But what I do know is that the safety of the house would be improved and liability for the town would be constrained. I mean, if something horrible happens up there, obviously it creates a big mess, but you have a state compliant fire suppression system to rely on.
So there have not been beds and sleeping up in that space?
The only time that we have slept people up there, okay, is in the heat of summer, 4th of July, everybody descends on us. So yes, I have had people sleep up there during those, high traffic times, short periods of time, and then they leave, right? So it's really, at this point, we had 3 kids who had never slept up there, because we have a 3-bedroom and so forth and so on. So, and now, well, my kids are gone, so it's just us. We have much less visitors now. So again, going back to the question that was asked earlier, am I looking to expand to 2 bedrooms? I don't know. Could it be used for 2 bedrooms? Absolutely, right? There's it's 2 separate rooms, there's a bathroom, so forth and so on. So, the space has been divided, it is what it is. But, our plans are, it's not like I had this on the drawing board, so to speak, I need 2 bedrooms.
Thank you.
So, from my standpoint, it hasn't stand out. Thank you. To answer your question, it hasn't been used as living space, nobody's established a residency there, nobody's sleeping long-term, anything like that. And it is now, I can assure the board, as you've heard tonight, that it now is existing only in compliance with that certificate of occupancy. And piggybacking on one other thing that Mr. Skidell said that I wanted to say in closing is that we know that there's been discussion in the town about, as there are in all towns really, about doing something without going to the building department and then coming back to get forgiveness for it, rather than starting off on the right foot and trying to get approval, the proper approval if it's forthcoming. One of the things that, to me, when I reviewed the file and the application to work on it, that was striking is that the Skidells have, Jack and Alexa have come to the town for just about everything that they did on the property. I mean, there's very minor things that required approval, but that they came to the town and got the necessary approval for, including this application. So, I don't know what the situations were that were mentioned tonight. I'm not familiar with that.
What situation?
With the contractors that spoke about other work that had been done in other places. But I can tell you in this house that Mr. Jack and Alexa, from the beginning wanted to do the right thing as far as the town and follow this process rather than anything else. So if you have requests for other submissions, like if you keep the hearing open, I could make them, or I could have.
You could also close the hearing and you'd have until October 11th to submit any of the things. Right now, we're looking for the addresses of those buildings where your contractor installed fire suppression systems.
That's very important.
3rd floor.
Yeah, very important. I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, since Reed's here, if he has anything to add.
Okay. And, we have a 3rd floor plan, but maybe we should get a full house plan. I think that would be helpful as well. You have some sort of drawings of the house, right? So if we could get that stuff before October 11th, then we could close this later on tonight. If you have a set. Yeah, no, if you just submit so we can all have copies.
And seeing that Mr. Karen's still here behind me, I did want to thank him again for that clarification as to the records, and I appreciate that. I'm sorry that took up part of the application, but I'm glad that point was clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anybody else wish to weigh in on this application?
I'll just I don't have Reed Karen, building inspector, senior building inspector. I don't have an opinion about whether you should grant it or not. My issue at the time that I said that they couldn't have a habitable 3rd floor, I was in the building and it was the 3rd floor was carpeted. It had a bed. It had the improvements of habitable space. So I can't approve a habitable third floor, without approval. And the C of O, they keep talking about a C of O for a third floor. The C of O issued in 1990 was for a 2-story, 1-family dwelling with basement porches, attached gazebo, and storage attic. And it says specifically, storage attic not to be used for habitable space. So that was what was.
Okay, Reed, let me ask you a question. When were you in there where there was beds in there or a bed in there?
I was in there for an inspection. It was when Chris was doing some work there. I have to check my records as to what that was. It was really 2019.
Okay. Anyone else wish to weigh in? No, anybody out in Zoom land want to weigh in? No, anybody here have any questions for anybody who presented here tonight?
No, I think I've
I
asked.
think we can close this and leave it open to written correspondence. Okay, so we're going to close the hearing and leave it open to written correspondence.
Motion to close it?
Yes.
Yeah, until October 11th. So can I have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I think it's time to close the meeting. I want to close the meeting at, what time is it? 8:46.
Motion to close?
Motion to close?
I'll make a motion to close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.